Ladies and gentlemen, there's a quote by Brene Brown that resonates deeply with today's topic. Daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves, even when we risk disappointing others. Boundaries are not just a form of self-protection, they are an act of self-respect. Sometimes we encounter relationships that no longer serve us, ones that drain our energy, violate our values, or leave us questioning our worth. Cutting ties with someone isn't easy, and it often comes with a heavy dose of guilt. But as Brene Brown teaches us, it's important to lean into the discomfort, because growth often comes on the other side of courage. Today, I want to talk about 7 clear signs that it might be time to cut all contact with someone. These are not just signs. They're red flags that point to the importance of protecting your peace and prioritizing your well-being. Brene Brown often speaks about how trust is built in small moments. If someone consistently disrespects you, whether through hurtful words, dismissive actions, or manipulative behaviors, they're showing you that they don't value your trust. You deserve relationships where kindness and respect are the foundation. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's a courageous act of self-care. If someone continually ignores or tramples on your boundaries, they're disregarding your humanity. Remember, as Brene reminds us, boundaries aren't meant to push people away. They're there to protect what matters most to us. Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling like all your energy has been siphoned away? That's a telltale sign of emotional toxicity. Brene teaches us the value of protecting our energy and ensuring that our emotional resources are spent on relationships that uplift us, not deplete us. According to Brene's research, shame thrives in secrecy. When someone refuses to take responsibility for their hurtful actions and instead shifts blame, it creates a pattern of emotional harm. Healthy relationships require accountability, vulnerability, and mutual effort. True connection, as Brene defines it, is when someone sees and supports you in your authentic self. If someone constantly belittles your achievements or feels threatened by your growth, they're not in alignment with your journey. Brene says we can't base our worthiness on someone else's opinion of us. Staying in a relationship solely because of guilt, obligation, or fear of disappointing someone else is a disservice to both parties. You can care for someone without sacrificing your own well-being. Finally, if someone's presence consistently triggers stress, anxiety, or feelings of inadequacy, it's a clear sign to reevaluate. Protecting your mental health isn't just a right, it's a necessity. Brene reminds us that our ability to hold space for others is only as strong as our self-compassion. You have the right to step into the light and leave behind relationships that no longer serve you. It takes courage, but it's a step toward freedom, self-respect, and wholeness. Brene Brown's research into vulnerability and human connection emphasizes the importance of trust as the foundation of every meaningful relationship. She describes trust as being built in small, everyday moments that demonstrate respect, empathy, and care. However, when someone consistently disrespects you or exhibits toxic behavior, it erodes that trust. Over time, this can damage your sense of self-worth and create an unhealthy dynamic in the relationship. Disrespect can take many forms. It can be verbal, such as someone belittling you, making cruel jokes at your expense, or using harsh words in arguments. Or it could be nonverbal, like dismissive gestures, rolling your eyes, or ignoring your contributions during conversations. Sometimes disrespect is more subtle and insidious, such as when someone constantly interrupts you or invalidates your feelings. Toxic behavior, on the other hand, might include manipulation, gaslighting, or exploiting your vulnerabilities for their gain. It's important to recognize that consistent disrespect is not something you should normalize or tolerate. While everyone has bad days or moments when they might unintentionally hurt others, the key difference is whether the person takes responsibility for their actions and makes an effort to change. Brene Brown highlights the importance of accountability in relationships, pointing out that when someone genuinely cares about you, they will acknowledge their mistakes and work to rebuild trust. If someone repeatedly dismisses your feelings or refuses to address their behavior, it's a sign that they may not value the relationship as much as you do. Educationally, this topic connects to the broader concept of emotional intelligence, which includes the ability to understand, manage, and navigate relationships effectively. A person with strong emotional intelligence will show empathy, listen actively, and respect boundaries, even during conflicts. On the other hand, individuals who consistently display disrespectful or toxic behavior often lack these skills or are unwilling to develop them. This creates an imbalance in the relationship where one person is left carrying the emotional weight while the other continues their harmful patterns. From a psychological perspective, enduring disrespect over time can lead to stress, anxiety, and even a diminished sense of self-worth. Studies on interpersonal relationships show that people who experience frequent disrespect in their relationships are more likely to internalize negative messages about themselves, which can impact their confidence and mental health. This is why it's crucial to recognize the signs early and set boundaries to protect yourself. Brene Brown's work also emphasizes the role of courage in addressing these situations. It takes courage to acknowledge that someone's behavior is harmful, especially if it's someone you care about deeply. It also requires courage to have difficult conversations about their behavior or to step away from the relationship altogether if they are unwilling to change. The idea is not to vilify the other person, but to prioritize your own well-being and recognize that you deserve relationships rooted in mutual respect. In an educational context, this lesson can be applied to various settings, from friendships to professional environments. Learning to identify and address consistent disrespect or toxic behavior is an essential life skill that promotes emotional resilience, self-respect, and healthier connections with others. Boundaries are the invisible lines that define what is acceptable and unacceptable in a relationship. They are essential for maintaining emotional well-being and ensuring that our values and needs are respected. Brene Brown highlights that setting boundaries is not about creating distance or pushing people away. Rather, it is about honoring ourselves. When someone dismisses or ignores your boundaries, it is a sign of disrespect and disregard for your individuality, which can have significant consequences for your emotional and mental health. Understanding boundaries begins with recognizing that they are personal and unique to each individual. What feels acceptable to one person might not feel acceptable to another. Boundaries can take many forms. For example, you might set boundaries around your time by letting others know when you are available and when you need space. You might set boundaries around communication, such as how you prefer to be spoken to or the kind of language that feels respectful to you. Boundaries can also relate to physical space, emotional vulnerability, or specific behaviors that you find hurtful or intrusive. When someone dismisses your boundaries, they are essentially saying that their needs, preferences, or desires take precedence over your well-being. This can manifest in various ways. It might be a friend who continues to show up uninvited after you have asked them to give you notice before visiting. It could be a partner who pressures you into sharing personal information before you are ready, or a colleague who interrupts your work despite being told that you need uninterrupted focus. Regardless of the context, dismissing boundaries undermines trust and creates an imbalance in the relationship. From an educational perspective, the importance of boundaries can be connected to the concept of emotional safety. Emotional safety occurs when we feel secure enough in a relationship to express our thoughts and feelings without fear of judgment or violation. Boundaries are the foundation of emotional safety as they communicate our needs and expectations clearly. When someone honors your boundaries, they demonstrate that they value your emotional safety. Conversely, when someone dismisses them, it creates an environment of insecurity and discomfort. Psychologically, the consistent dismissal of boundaries can lead to a range of negative outcomes. It can cause feelings of frustration, resentment, and helplessness. Over time, it may even lead to self-doubt as you begin to question whether your boundaries are reasonable or valid. This is why it is essential to identify patterns of boundary violations and address them early. Having open and honest conversations about your boundaries is one way to clarify your expectations and give the other person an opportunity to understand and adjust their behavior. Brene Brown emphasizes that setting boundaries is an act of courage because it often requires confronting uncomfortable situations or risking conflict. It is also an act of compassion because it ensures that you are showing up authentically in your relationships while also allowing others to understand what you need to thrive. Recognizing when someone repeatedly dismisses your boundaries is a crucial step in protecting your emotional well-being and cultivating relationships that are built on mutual respect and understanding. Relationships should be sources of mutual support, encouragement, and energy. While no relationship is perfect, healthy connections leave you feeling valued and emotionally fulfilled rather than depleted. When interactions with someone consistently leave you feeling emotionally drained, it is a sign that the dynamic may be unhealthy. This phenomenon, often referred to as emotional exhaustion, occurs when a relationship becomes one-sided, overly demanding, or rooted in negativity. Brene Brown's work highlights the importance of being mindful of how relationships impact our emotional energy, as this directly affects our well-being and ability to show up authentically in other areas of life. Emotional drainage can manifest in various ways. It might involve a person who constantly talks about their problems without showing interest in your life. It could be someone who creates drama or conflict that you are expected to mediate. Alternatively, it may stem from an individual whose pessimism, complaints, or critical comments create a heavy emotional atmosphere. In any case, these interactions feel exhausting because they require you to give more energy than you receive. Over time, this imbalance can take a toll on your mental health and overall sense of balance. From an educational perspective, understanding emotional drainage requires an awareness of emotional labor. Emotional labor refers to the effort we invest in managing our emotions and the emotions of others in social interactions. While emotional labor is a natural part of all relationships, it becomes problematic when it is disproportionately placed on one person. For example, if you find yourself constantly reassuring someone, resolving their conflicts, or absorbing their negativity without any reciprocity, you are likely shouldering an unsustainable amount of emotional labor. Emotional exhaustion is also tied to the concept of empathy fatigue. Empathy fatigue occurs when you feel emotionally overwhelmed or depleted from consistently giving empathy to someone without receiving support in return. Brene Brown highlights that while empathy is a cornerstone of meaningful relationships, it must be balanced with boundaries and self-compassion. Without these safeguards, excessive emotional labor can lead to burnout, resentment, and a diminished capacity to engage authentically with others. To address emotional drainage, it is important to evaluate the dynamics of the relationship. Ask yourself whether the relationship feels reciprocal or one-sided. Consider whether the person shows genuine interest in your well-being or whether they primarily focus on their needs. Reflect on how you feel before and after interactions. If you notice a pattern of dread, fatigue, or frustration, it is a clear indication that the relationship may not be serving your emotional needs. Accountability is a cornerstone of healthy relationships as it fosters trust, transparency, and emotional safety. Brene Brown's work underscores the importance of accountability in human connection and explains how it strengthens relationships by creating an environment where both individuals take responsibility for their actions and the impact they have on one another. When someone refuses to take accountability for their behavior, especially when their actions have caused harm, it creates a toxic dynamic that can erode trust and undermine emotional well-being. A lack of accountability often manifests in the form of defensiveness or denial. When someone is unwilling to acknowledge their mistakes, they may shift blame onto others, make excuses, or downplay the severity of their actions. For example, a person might refuse to admit that their hurtful words caused pain and instead claim that you are being overly sensitive or misinterpreting their intentions. Alternatively, they may avoid taking responsibility by claiming that their actions were justified or by minimizing the consequences of their behavior. This refusal to accept responsibility can have a significant impact on the person who is harmed. Brene Brown highlights how shame and guilt thrive in the absence of accountability. When someone refuses to acknowledge the hurt they've caused, it often leaves the victim questioning their own worth and doubting their perceptions of reality. This is especially true in cases of emotional manipulation or gaslighting, where the person may deliberately distort the truth to make the other person feel confused or invalidated. Over time, this can lead to feelings of helplessness, resentment, and self-doubt. Educationally, a lack of accountability can be understood in terms of psychological defense mechanisms. People who consistently refuse to take responsibility for their actions may be relying on defense mechanisms such as denial, projection, or rationalization to protect their sense of self, esteem, or avoid confronting uncomfortable truths. While these mechanisms may provide temporary relief from guilt or shame, they ultimately hinder personal growth and damage relationships. Without the ability to reflect on and learn from their mistakes, a person is unlikely to change their behavior or improve their interactions with others. Psychologically, the refusal to take accountability can also be linked to narcissism or a lack of emotional maturity. Narcissistic individuals often struggle to take responsibility for their actions because doing so would challenge their inflated sense of self-importance. Similarly, individuals with low emotional maturity may lack the capacity to understand the impact of their behavior on others, or may be too focused on protecting their ego to engage in honest self-reflection. In either case, the refusal to accept accountability creates an imbalance in the relationship where one person is left to bear the emotional burden while the other remains detached from the consequences of their actions. Brene Brown emphasizes that accountability requires vulnerability and courage. It takes strength to admit when you are wrong and to take responsibility for the harm you have caused. However, in healthy relationships, both parties should be willing to engage in this process as it is essential for rebuilding trust and fostering emotional connection. If someone continually refuses to take responsibility for their behavior, it may be a sign that they are unwilling to grow or change, and that the relationship is no longer healthy. Recognizing this refusal as a red flag is crucial in maintaining personal boundaries and protecting emotional. Healthy relationships are rooted in mutual respect and support. Brene Brown emphasizes the importance of connection that allows individuals to feel seen, heard, and valued in their authentic selves. When someone undermines your growth or success, it not only disrupts this connection, but also creates an environment that stifles your potential and hinders your ability to thrive. This behavior can be subtle or overt, but its impact is equally damaging as it erodes confidence and discourages progress. Undermining can take various forms, such as belittling your achievements, dismissing your aspirations, or actively sabotaging your efforts. For instance, a friend might make sarcastic comments about your recent promotion, implying that you did not deserve it. A partner might downplay the significance of your educational or career goals, suggesting that they are not as important as their own. In some cases, the person might even create obstacles that make it harder for you to succeed, such as withholding critical information, offering unsolicited discouragement, or creating unnecessary distractions. These behaviors often stem from insecurity, jealousy, or a fear of losing control over the dynamic of the relationship. Educationally, this issue can be connected to the concept of self-efficacy, which refers to an individual's belief in their ability to achieve goals and overcome challenges. Research shows that supportive relationships enhance self-efficacy by providing encouragement and validation, whereas relationships that involve criticism or sabotage diminish it. When someone undermines your success, they are actively chipping away at your self-efficacy, making it harder for you to trust your abilities and pursue opportunities. Over time, this can lead to self-doubt, hesitation, and a reluctance to take risks or strive for growth. The psychological impact of being undermined is significant. Brene Brown's work on vulnerability highlights how individuals thrive in environments that foster courage and authenticity. When someone close to you consistently undermines your success, it creates an atmosphere of fear and shame rather than one of safety and trust. This dynamic can cause you to question your worth and diminish your willingness to share your goals or celebrate your accomplishments. It can also lead to a cycle of dependency, where you feel obligated to seek validation from the very person who is undermining you despite the harm they are causing. From a relational perspective, undermining behavior reflects a lack of emotional maturity and an inability to celebrate other successes. Healthy relationships are built on the principle of interdependence, where both individuals support and uplift one another while maintaining their individuality and pursuing their unique paths. When someone undermines your growth, they are prioritizing their own insecurities over the strength of the relationship and disregarding the importance of mutual respect and encouragement. Healthy relationships are built on mutual care, respect, and a genuine desire to connect with one another. When a relationship exists solely because of guilt or obligation, it becomes a draining experience that can hinder personal growth and emotional well-being. Brene Brown's work reminds us that true connection cannot thrive in environments where one person feels trapped by unspoken expectations or the fear of disappointing others. A relationship that relies on guilt or obligation lacks authenticity and places an unhealthy burden on the individual who feels responsible for maintaining it. Guilt and obligation often arise in relationships where there is an imbalance of power or where one party uses manipulation to maintain control. This could include a friend who frequently reminds you of everything they have done for you, implying that you owe them constant support or attention. It might involve a family member who expects you to prioritize their needs over your own, simply because of shared history or cultural expectations. In romantic relationships, guilt might manifest as feeling obligated to stay because of the time invested or the fear of hurting the other person. From an educational perspective, the dynamics of guilt and obligation in relationships can be explained through the concept of emotional coercion. Emotional coercion occurs when someone uses guilt, shaming tactics, or implied consequences to influence another person's behavior. This creates a dynamic where the person being coerced feels pressured to comply, even when it comes at the expense of their own happiness or well-being. Over time, this can lead to feelings of resentment, exhaustion, and a sense of losing autonomy in the relationship. Psychologically, staying in a relationship out of guilt or obligation can have significant consequences. Brene Brown's research on vulnerability and authenticity highlights the importance of showing up as your true self in relationships. When you remain in a relationship solely because of external pressures, you are not able to engage authentically or express your needs and desires. This disconnect can lead to feelings of frustration and isolation, as you may feel that your role in the relationship is defined by what you provide rather than who you truly are. It is also important to recognize the cultural and social factors that can perpetuate guilt-based relationships. Many people are raised with the belief that loyalty to family, friends, or partners is an unbreakable obligation, regardless of how they are treated. While loyalty can be a beautiful quality, it should not come at the cost of your emotional or mental health. Recognizing this distinction requires self-awareness and the courage to challenge societal expectations that prioritize obligation over personal well-being.